Ecological Marxism is an ideology that follows Marxist critique of capitalist production and accumulation. It proposes a new way of understanding and praxis in dealing with nature, one that stresses on human development as co-evolving with nature. Before we can begin to understand the basic concepts espoused by ecological Marxism, we first have to state how Marx views the relationship of society with nature. He calls the energetic exchange between society and nature through labor metabolism. Why? It's because almost every human activity involves the use of the natural environment. Marx views the history of humanity in terms of the production of goods or use values. He notes that in the transition from pre-modern societies to modern societies, there was a change in how this metabolism worked. During the pre-modern times, the production of goods was ordinarily part of the whole experience of consumption and enjoyment. People would consume what they produce and produce what they consume. During the modern times, especially during the modern capitalist industrialization years, there was a required shift of energy sources from muscle to machines. Goods are no longer just for consumption. Goods have become commodities. Their former use values are now turned into exchange values, wherein goods are produced not to be consumed, but to be traded with other goods, providing a surplus of items. During this time, nature was given the source sink treatment. It's the source of raw materials, but is at the same time the sink where the excrements of the process of production are thrown into. Because of this transition from the pre-modern times to the modern times, the rural domestic industry is destroyed, allowing for the sustenance of the capitalist industry. This results to the expropriation of the self-supporting workers from the rural industry by capitalists. These workers become part of the social system of product distribution, which necessarily bring about the problems associated with massive environmental depletion and degradation. The town-country separation, as stated in introductory part, is an indicator of the metabolic rift, which was the concept of John Bellamy Foster after he was influenced by Marx's ideas on Liebig's soil chemistry. This metabolic rift was defined to be the irreparable rift in the interdependent process of social metabolism, as we had earlier discussed to be the relationship of man and nature. One of the researchers involved in the soil chemistry was consistent with those in the example of town-country separation, wherein the soil from the rural areas were moved and commodified in the urban areas. Thus, instead of the use value of natural resources, the soil was moved to be privatized to land as exchange value. The increase of agricultural industries during the 1800s could consider that the soil in the rural area was no longer of its natural use value, but was later on manipulated to be used in capitalistic tendencies, such that the soil was being amended with fertilizers. The nutrients of the soil, which was being transferred from rural to urban, continues to be depleted and exploited if the soil continues to be part of capital production. On this case, if people were to have the notion of continuous usage of natural resource, it would mean that man has dominance over nature, which should not be, since this very idea is separated from Marx and Engels' idea of man living from nature. The healing of this particular rift was considered to be the vision of the socialist future that Marx had in mind.